This is a devotional for our Friday for the week about coins. This one is called Coins for the Building Fund. It's based on the book of Ezra, chapter 2, verses 64 through 69. The whole assembly together was 42,360, besides their male and female servants, of whom there were 7,337. And they had 200 male and female singers. They had 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. As soon as they came to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of families made freewill offerings for the house of God to erect it on its site. According to their resources, they gave to the building fund 61,000 derricks of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly robes. Now, I'm willing to bet this is a passage you have not read very often. It's one I had not read very often. I mean, I've read Ezra and Nehemiah before, but it's not a part of the scripture that we focus on a whole lot. And the story in Ezra, it's about 50 years after the exile in Babylon. And the Jewish people are returning to their homeland. In this chapter, we read, and no detail was spared, that Ezra gives this narrative of all of them coming back and who came back. And it reads a lot of times kind of like, like in the Chronicles and in Leviticus, and they get into such detail. But what he's giving overall is this narrative of God's promise being fulfilled. The promise that the people would return, that they would come back to the promised land. Now, it's been 50 years of captivity. And what that means is that some of the people who had been marched to Babylon into the exile didn't come back. They did not return to Palestine. It also means that you have 2, if not 3 generations of people coming who've never been there before. All they've ever known is life in Babylon. They've never known what it was to live in Palestine. They grew up, they had whole lives without ever knowing the majesty or the ritual of what went on at the temple. So the first place they go is to the site of the house of the temple, the house of the Lord. And it talks about who all is in this assembly, and it gets into all that wonderful detail, even about how many camels and donkeys they had with them. But it also talks about the offerings, the free will offerings that are made by the people of all these coins, and in that time money was coins, that they were brought to help begin this task of rebuilding, of trying to, you think about a building, even if it hasn't been purposefully destroyed, if it's just sat empty for 50 years, there's a lot of damage to repair. Any building that sat empty for a long time, it starts to deteriorate, especially in that climate and in that place. Animals would have wandered in, and there would have been a lot of mess everywhere. And you figure it had been destroyed to a large extent, even if it wasn't like every stone was gone, but it still would have been a real mess what they came back to. And so they were going to have to rebuild and do some pretty massive reconstruction to make this happen. But they were so determined to restore the place of worship that the very first thing they did was take up an offering and put money in the treasury. And that's the first thing they did. Coins that are freely given, money freely given, it has the power to cast a vision and to shape the future. Generosity begets generosity. It's a way that we back up our belief in God's promises with our coins, our time, our energy, our talents. It's a way of demonstrating faith, even in the face of loss, even in the face of rubble, even in the face of a pandemic. It's a way that we demonstrate that we still have faith that life will return to normal one day. Now it's funny when we talk about, generosity begetting generosity. I know I've told the story before, but it's one of my all-time favorite stories of my preacher's kids. When my two younger kids they were young, and we had this big thing at church where we had been working toward this big goal in mission giving. And we had this huge project we were trying to fund. And so we had this specific day where we were all bringing in our pledges and all bringing in the money that we had collected and that we had saved. And we were all going to go up, during the offering time, do a special offering time to go up and take this money up. Okay. So the children's message that day, which is before this, pastor goes up with this huge jar he's collected of all these coins, and he gives handfuls of coins to all the children. Now my two younger kids are up there, Rob and Kate. And there's probably 20 some kids up there. I don't know, there's a whole gaggle of children standing around, and it's up on this raised dais so everyone could see them. And the sanctuary holds like 650 people when it's full, and it was fairly full. So there's probably 500 people in there that day. Yeah. So we're all in there, and all these kids. He gives them all a big handful of coins, just hands them out. And then he talks about what we're going to do that day. And he says to these children, now that you know what we're going to do, as I said, that money's yours. You can keep it. I'm giving away money. You can have it. He said, but I'm asking everybody else in this congregation to put money into the baskets today to try to help people in Peru and Mexico and some of the other missions we were doing. And the kids then were able to make a choice on what they wanted to do with their money. Every child up there took the money and decided to put it in the basket, except one, my daughter, who, when her brother not very quietly said to her, Katie, you're supposed to put the money in the basket, yelled, no, he said I could keep it, in front of the entire congregation. Yeah, lots of laughter. And I just shook my head and closed my eyes and went, oh yeah, it's my kid. Great. Soon to be pastor's kid. Fabulous. Now what happened later though, was after she sat down and heard the sermon and thought about it a little more, she decided to take her money out when the rest of the grown-ups did and put it in the basket. But this idea that generosity begets generosity, that people see other people giving and so then they want to help too. It can be difficult to be the first one to step forward and say, I will help do this. But once you've done that, you'll notice other people start to follow suit. They're like, yeah, maybe it's not such a bad idea. We could do that too. The one other detail in here is the detail he makes at the end about the priestly robes, that there were 100 of them that were given. Now that's interesting because it's a reminder that worship is going to happen again. These robes, represented the foresight of probably a family who took them with them. They took what they treasured most. That idea that faith would return, that they would return and be able to use these again. That's important. Because when you think about people going into exile, you take what's most important to you. Who would think to take priestly robes with them? That shows you how many different people thought this was important enough to take them with them. I would have to say that if my family was forced to go into exile, or if I could only grab the most important things to me, I don't know that my minister's robes would be the first thing I would run for. I would want to grab passports and a few photographs and a couple of things that I have that are really important to me. But I don't know that my robes would be the first thing I would think of. But it was for these people. These were the first things that they thought of, that they kept all those years. So think about this. Have you ever lost your home or country? If so, what did you take with you, or what did you miss the most? Now, I've never lost my country, and I've never lost my home, but I've left my home. I mean, I've moved far away multiple times. And both times, the kinds of things I missed were very different. Sometimes it was food, certain foods that I can't get in parts of the country. Other times it was, I grew up right near the water, right on the Great Lakes. So I do miss the water. That's something I find that I miss a lot. The little lakes around here that I can see the other side of, yeah, those aren't really lakes. They're ponds as far as I'm concerned. So, when the other side of the lake is Canada, yeah. So that's always tough for me. I know there's certain food things my husband and I both miss, read stories of contemporary refugees. How did they survive their forced exile? That's very enlightening sometimes. When have you made a free will offering in order to help shape a promised future? I think that's an important one too, for us all to think about. Being able to do that, to freely give out of what we have, to be able to ensure the future, maybe not for ourselves, a future we'll never see, but for someone else. I think that's a huge thing, a huge gift that you can give to somebody. So anyway, I hope this has been enlightening on a part of scripture we don't read very often. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.